New York City is an essential part of who Spider-Man is as a character. One could argue that New York City is one of the major characters in any Spider-Man comic book, show, movie, or game, and I would agree with that statement. New York City should feel like its own character. It should be full of life and personality. So what does this have to do with Marvel's Spider-Man 2? Well, as much as I loved Marvel's Spider-Man, I feel like there's plenty room for improvement when it comes to making New York City feel more alive. Don't get me wrong here, I do think that Insomniac Games did a pretty good job of representing New York City in the first game and in Spider-Man Miles Morales. There was certainly a lot of diversity within the NPCs, people flooded the sidewalks, the buildings and skyscrapers looked amazing, but there are times where the game kind of feels lonely, as if you're swinging throughout an empty New York City. Something is just missing. So I want to go over a few things I would like to see implemented in Marvel's Spider-Man 2 to make New York City feel like its own character. So let's swing on into it. One major thing that I believe will make New York City feel more alive in Spider-Man 2 is the ability to go in and out of buildings, restaurants, and special landmarks. This will make the buildings feel like they're more than just geometry to swing around on. I've made this point before, but not every building needs to be accessible. But coffee shops, pizza parlors, heck, maybe even comic book shops would be really awesome to visit. As much as I did not like the Amazing Spider-Man games, I freaking love the fact that you could visit Stan Lee's comic book shop. It was so cool. I'd love to have a comic book shop available where you could see Easter eggs and get cool collectibles. And in the comic book shop, you would have all sorts of NPCs in there geeking out about the latest Spider-Man comics. It would just be so cool to have little accessible locations like this scattered throughout New York City. Unfortunately, the only two locations I can think of in the first game that you could actually go inside of was Feast and Otto's Lab. There may be others, but those are the only two I can actually think of right now. We definitely need more locations we are able to visit, especially places like the lobbies of the Avengers Tower, the Wakanda Embassy, or even the Sanctum Sanctorum. Those would be really cool. It'd be awesome to see a bunch of Easter eggs in all of those. I think that those are great potential candidates for buildings that we can actually visit. And I can't forget making Peter's house a playable location. I have a feeling that this will happen though, considering they did make Miles' apartment playable in Spider-Man Miles Morales. So hopefully they do the same for Peter in Spider-Man 2. Now let's address the NPCs in this game. There were options for fun interactions with civilian NPCs in the first Spider-Man game. You could high-five them and take selfies. My problem isn't necessarily the interactions that you had, but the lack of variety with the NPCs. Me and News to Astonish actually covered this in the latest podcast episode we did. But where the heck are all the kids in this game? All we see are adults, even in the parks. And why do all of the NPCs look like they're wearing the same outfit or the same color palette within their outfit? This is New York City. There should be people with vibrant and diverse styles. That's just my opinion. It's nothing major, but I feel like the people of New York City could be better represented with their style. The next thing I would like to see are street level events or markets. As someone who has been to New York City over a dozen times, one of the coolest things about it is experiencing different cultures, like Little China, Little Jamaica, Haiti, all sorts of cultures and markets. I would love to see these things represented in the game. These are just little areas that are full of street performers from each country and bring so much life to the city. The best example of something I would like to see is from the Rio Morales rally in Spider-Man Miles Morales. This little street is full of so much life and personality from the NPCs. I would like to see this, but on a little bit of a larger scale, representing different cultures and communities. This whole scene from Spider-Man Miles Morales is perfect and what really represents New York City. It definitely feels lively and is something we need more of in the next game. Alright, now we're on to one of the major aspects of New York City that hasn't been present in the Spider-Man games, and that is the subway system. When you hear someone mention the word subway station, it's probably likely that the first thing they think of is New York City. It's a major part of the city and should be explorable in Spider-Man 2. We should have access to below the streets. I mean, there is crime down there in the subway stations, right? It would be really nice to have that available where you could see street performers down there. It's a major part of New York City. We need it in the game. Overall, this video isn't intended to hate on the New York City we got in Marvel's Spider-Man. I really enjoyed it, but there is always room for improvement. I really want to see the amount of interactions increase in Spider-Man 2 with all of the NPCs, and I really just want to feel like New York City is alive and properly represented. It's a big deal for me. I would love to know what you guys think down in the comments section. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with all of the Marvel Spider-Man 2 hype. Like the video if you did enjoy, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.